Welcome to the Rebound Rundown. I'm your host, Paul Fritschner. This is your daily digest college basketball show that covers everything you need to know about your favorite team. From game previews to recap to press conferences and breakdowns, we have you covered. Every Monday through Friday with your morning commute, wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Welcome into another episode of the Rebound Rundown. I'm your host, Paul Fritschner. It's great to be here today from Ohio University, the Convocation Center, joined by the head coach of the Ohio Bobcats, Jeff Boals. This episode has been a long time in the making. I'm glad we made it out here to Athens to finally sit down and have this conversation. Jeff, it's great to be here with you. As I said there in the intro that you just heard, this is a show that runs every day during the college basketball season. But here in the offseason, we've been doing some weekly content, as you've heard, all summer long with coaches. Some really good content, I think, coming up still. One episode a week leading into the season, maybe mix some more in as well as we get team previews, all of that. But the focus of this show, covering teams here around the Cincinnati area and the Midwest. And really, I just wanted an excuse to come out here, Coach, and talk to you because I know you and I have kind of been bouncing back and forth for a while to make this happen. And I'm glad we finally did.
Finally here, and appreciate you guys coming. Obviously, like I told you, a big fan of what you've been doing and been following you for the last couple of years. And thanks for coming over to Athens.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start here. Let's start with a little bit of your background. So in this show, for people listening, whether you're an Ohio fan or I hope a college basketball fan in general, you'll have an idea. You'll get all of it, right? You'll get a preview of this upcoming year's team, a team I know you have a really experienced group. You just were kind enough to let us watch practice out here. So a really experienced group here at Ohio, but also to learn more about you and your career, how you ended up here and what you've called a dream job at your alma mater and all of that. So I want to start there. What is it like coaching at your alma mater, a place where you played and had such a successful career, and now you come home after finding your way back home through some other stops to be able to enter your 7th season here as head coach at the Ohio Bobcats?
Yeah, so if you go all the way back to 1995, we were, I think, 16-4. Tore my ACL for the 3rd time, and that ended my career. And we had 14 games left, and I was a biology major here, and I wanted to be a physical therapist, so I started applying to PT schools. And then at the end of the season, we lost an assistant coach, and my head coach, Larry Hunter, asked me if I'd be interested in coaching, and I'm like, sure. I had no idea what it meant, what it entailed. And I always tell people if I knew I was getting into coaching, I would never have been a biology major, taking cell chemistry, organic chemistry, neuroanatomy. But, my first job here, I made $6,000 and I absolutely loved it. And after a couple years, I went to University of Charleston, West Virginia, and then to Marshall. I kind of realized I wanted to make this a profession. And, eventually my goal was to be a head coach. And very few people can say they're the head coach at their alma mater, where they played, where they went to school. So I feel blessed to be able to be here, like you said, starting year 7.
Well, it's crazy thinking back to your early years of your career and specifically coming right out of school and coaching because, you're coaching your teammates, right? You're coaching guys that you had just played with. What was the dynamic like?
Yeah, it was different, because back then, I ran our study tables. I was in charge of, pretty much all the off-the-court stuff, travel. And it was a different dynamic, just coaching those guys, knowing you've just, we're in the locker room with them a year before. But, it kind of helped you leverage relationships and try to figure things out. And, my college experience, I redshirted my first year, had a torn ACL, didn't practice or play. My second year, I played 39 minutes the whole year. Didn't even play the equivalent of 1 game. And then, I kind of had to figure out my role. And then, started playing my sophomore, junior, senior year. So I played every role imaginable, which has really helped me from a coaching standpoint, empathy, understanding what guys are thinking. From bench guys, role guys, walk-ons, you name it, I've done it.
Yeah, and before we get more into your coaching career, your son, who's part of this program, has also had some ACL injuries as well. Crazy is probably not the right word. That sounds a little too simple, but to have your son go through that after you went through pretty much the exact same thing, how much has he leaned on you for advice? Obviously you're his dad, but to have somebody within your own family who has had literally the same exact situation that he's gone through, to be able to talk to him about how tough it is through those injuries?
Yeah, it was rough as a parent, number one. He tore his first ACL in his junior year in high school. And I remember the first meeting with the doctor. The doctor's kind of like, hey, family history plays a role. And, my son looked at me like he wanted to punch me in the mouth because I didn't give him the best DNA from a knee standpoint. But he's been through a lot of adversity, in his short life. He was supposed to have his third surgery here in August. He's going to push it back till the springtime. He's going to medically disqualify, not play, and we're going to name him a student assistant. He wants to coach. He's been around coaching his whole life. He's been around locker rooms his whole life. He'll be a really good coach one day.
How do you identify some of the talent on the bench that you might see? Hey, you're going to be a coach one day. I know you always hear about the managers, or maybe it's the walk-ons or student assistants, whoever it is, that they hang around and then they go on and become coaches because they've experienced it all, and maybe they weren't on the floor the whole time, but you can see the talent. Yeah,
a lot of times you can sense, like, just by the way people talk and see the game. And you don't necessarily need to be a starter or a scholarship guy to be a leader. Like I was a walk-on when I first got here, and I always took pride in my IQ and doing the right things. And you can kind of see through the years guys who are film and maybe they're playing, they're not playing, but they're talking to everyone else on the team about what to do, calling plays out. They're engrossed in the scouting report. Yeah. So you can kind of see it, through the years, guys who might want to end up coaching. And, some guys who don't, you think might be a good coach, that you talk to them about coaching.
You're here now. I mentioned you're going into your 7th year at Ohio. First of all, can you believe it's already been that long?
Yeah, hard to believe. That COVID year seemed like 10 years. So, but I think me coming back here, like I said, my goal is to be the head coach here. And when I was at Ohio State, we were 34-3, number one in the country one year, 31-8, went to the Final Four, and I got bypassed twice for this job. And so I ended up going to Stony Brook University. Sean Hilburn gave me my first opportunity to be a head coach. Went out to Long Island. In my 3rd year, we were 24-8. We beat South Carolina, George Washington, Rhode Island, Northern Iowa, and had 10 freshmen and sophomores coming back. So I really wasn't looking to leave. Had a couple Power Fours call, told them I wasn't interested. And then, OU called. And, I'm like, it's my alma mater. It's been my goal to be the head coach there. So 3rd time is a charm.
And now what you've been able to accomplish, you talk about the COVID season, and I mean, we could go on for probably this entire podcast just about that team. But I mean, you think back, you had Preston on that team, Vanderplas on that team. You had, of course, Mark Sears was on that team as a freshman, to be able to beat Virginia, but not even just beating Virginia, just looking at the way that team played, the talent on that team, and just what that team was able to do. How special was that team for you to coach? And did you know at the time the talent that you had? You can look back now, right? Hindsight's 2020. We can see the names, but did you know at the time going into that season what you had?
Yeah, I think it started with Ben Vanderplas and Jason Preston. Those two were special, and the development that our staff did, to get those guys a lot better. If you look at them, the first couple of years they were here, and then where they're at with our development, those guys made a huge jump. And that team went through a lot. Like you said, off the court with COVID, having to deal with everything, the delays and the pauses. I think we finished 17-6, but that team, would have won a lot of games if we were able to play them. But they kept getting better. They stayed together, and made a great run at the end. If you look at the 3 games we played in the MAC tournament, it was dominant. Yeah. And Jason Preston was on a different level. And like you said, Mark Sears really came on. The end of that year, and then the tandem of Ben Vanderplas. Those guys had a special chemistry. And then you got Dwight Wilson down low. And then going, playing Virginia, in Assembly Hall. It was kind of a surreal moment for me, seeing Tony Bennett on the other sideline, and then you win the game. I believe it was the 6th time ever that an Ohio University teams won a game in the tournament. And, that team lost to Creighton. It was devastating, because you couldn't coach that team another game. And then the following year, we won 25 games, got upset, and, had an unbelievable year. Mark Sears, Ben Vanderplas, both first-team All-League guys, and both of them told me they were coming back. So we felt good about that following year, and then 4 or 5 days later, Ben transfers, ends up at Virginia. Mark transfers, ends up at Alabama. That was kind of the first cycle, of the transfer portal area that really hurt us. And we still had a good year, but obviously losing two guys that caliber, it's hard to replace those guys.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because obviously one of the things that I've liked talking about throughout this series with coaches has been everybody's unique and different approach to the portal. And it feels like you never know what rules to follow because the rules might be changing every day because somebody says one thing and then another governing body says something else, and it's hard to keep up with everything. But as a head coach, you look back to that team, you talk about Sears and Vanderplas, obviously two huge names here, to think that you're going to get them back and then for them to transfer. What was that week like in how it all went down? And I guess for them to tell you that they're coming back and then to leave, I'm just kind of wondering, was that like an eye-opening moment for you in how the portal was going to operate?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I was, when they tell me they're coming back, I was expecting to have a good situation. And, finding out 20/20 hindsight, things happen behind the scenes that you can't control. There's a lot of Power Fours calling, all these mid-major schools during the course of the year, whether it's a AAU coach, a parent, high school coach. And that was an eye-opener for me, because the 24 hours after both those guys left, I was kind of shocked and kind of realized it was a new norm. You have to be ready to replace some of these guys. And, even last year we lost, a young man to a Power Four and told me for 3 weeks he was coming back and then, ends up leaving. So, you always got to be prepared, but that won't change how we develop, how we recruit. We're still going to recruit the best possible high school kid we can. We're going to develop them like crazy, take pride in the development. If you look at Mark Sears, shot 29% his first year, played 20 minutes a game as a freshman, and then it made a huge leap. That summer he made 15,000 threes, ended up shooting 40% from three, 20 points a game, first team all-league as a sophomore. And to see what he did at Alabama, we take pride in helping the development piece, with that. But we won't deviate, how we recruit. We're going to develop them, and hopefully the relationships and the cultures help you with retention. But with the way the money is nowadays, it's hard to turn that down and hard to say no to it. But we'll keep doing that. If we lose someone to transfer, we might replace them with a transfer.
How have you seen high school recruiting change from your eyes?
Yeah, we feel like, we can kind of, build those relationships and recruit some guys maybe that might be quote unquote a little higher than us.
Yeah.
And have a relationship with them, even if they go somewhere else and, we get them on a transfer kickback. Or in the springtime, there's a lot of kids who fall through the cracks because everyone's in the portal in the spring. And, you might find, we found Elijah Elliott, he signed with Florida Atlantic. We had recruited him prior to that. Their coach ended up leaving, going to Michigan. And, we ended up getting him, in the springtime. Same thing with Mark Sears. We got him in the springtime. So, we feel good about where we're at and kind of how we recruit, but we won't deviate how we're doing it.
It's always funny hearing a coach say that maybe now more than ever, you recruited somebody out of high school, or maybe you took a shot at them in a portal and you didn't get them at first, but you never know when they might come back around, that they might look to come to Ohio again a year or two down the line.
Yeah, I mean, the way the rules are and the way, playing time goes and the way the money is, you never know. So, we're not the type of staff that if you don't get a kid, some people might be upset and disappointed and either hang up on the kid or, give them a piece of their mind. But it's like, hey, we're here for you. If anything changes, let us know. And, you got to stay positive and keep recruiting those kids. Yeah.
What are some of the priorities you look for, stylistically, or when you're going out after a player? What sticks out to you about somebody where that's an Ohio basketball player right there?
Yeah, so 3 things we look for, Paul. Number 1's high character. We won't deviate from character. We want guys to do the right thing on the court, off the court. Second thing is guys who love the game of basketball that want to be pros. We know they're going to come in here, do the extra shots, take care of the body, extra treatment, extra film. And then the third thing, serious about the degree. Eventually the ball's going to stop bouncing no matter how good you are. So those are really the 3 things we key on character. Guys who want to be pros, who love the game of basketball, and then obviously education's important to them.
And to go right into it, talking about this upcoming year's team, I mean, you went to the portal, you got 4 guys that, stick out to me as impact players, but specifically Javen Simmons, who we're going to get a chance to talk to after this interview sitting down here. But, even just watching him for a few minutes at practice today, I mean, only got to watch about 20 minutes of him, but seeing his immediate leadership, somebody that has played in the MAC before, has had a lot of success in the MAC before already, to transfer here to Ohio, was he a top priority for you? And how much do you think he's going to impact this team?
Yeah, for us, when he went in the portal, we didn't know if we can get him, but we had him down right when I first got the job on visits. So we had a relationship with him prior to this. Obviously, playing against him, in the MAC, he had familiarity. So when we went in the portal, he had a lot of bigger schools, looking at him, and we felt good about just from a relationship geography standpoint. So we kind of threw our hat in the ring and met with him. He and his mom and dad. Had a really good meeting, and like you said, he came from a winning program at Toledo, but he brings a good presence for us from a leadership standpoint. Great voice in the huddles, in the locker room, and obviously he's been through the league a couple years, been in it 3 years, played 2 years.
Yeah,
and he'll give us a different dynamic.
Yeah, MAC Freshman of the Year in 2024. What stood out to you about his game when you had to go against him?
Yeah, well, he had a couple games where he just dominated us.
Yeah.
And he's a load inside.
I didn't want to say that. Just to be clear, I didn't want to say that. You look at the box score and you're thinking to yourself, oh, what was Jeff thinking after Jamin did this?
Yeah.
It must be nice you don't have to worry about him now.
No doubt. And I think for us, losing who we lost last year, we needed to bring some dynamic talent in there.
Sure.
And you look at, like you said, 3 of our 4 transfers, played Division I. Carter Reese, transferred from Ohio Northern. Dior Connors, Columbus kid, played at Appalachian State. They beat us. He had a really good game against us. And then, Jalen Breath was a 2-year start at UNC Greensboro. And, all 3 of those, transfers that came from Division I came from winning programs, which, you look for just from an intangible standpoint, winning culture standpoint, winning DNA standpoint, because I think that translates.
Yeah, one last thing I had about Simmons, you just look at the height that he brings to this team and maybe something that this Ohio team hasn't had necessarily the last season or two, that the presence underneath. Is that something you're looking for? Yeah,
I think, rebounding, a post presence on the block. Last year A.J. Clayton was our 5, but he was a stretch 5.
Yeah.
And he was a tough matchup. For a lot of other teams, and teams had a game plan differently, because of that. A couple years before that, we had Dwight Wilson, who reminds me a lot of Javen, just a low block presence. Yep. Can score at the basket, and Javen's really expanding his game. Last year he didn't shoot a lot of threes. At Toledo this year he's expanded it and looks very fluid shooting those things, and that'll be a big part of his arsenal this year.
All right, so I don't know if we're going to make it happen because it sounds like volleyball might be practicing afterwards, but I'm going to try and get him to play a game of horse. Is there anywhere on a court I can go that I can try to expand my game to maybe have a shot here?
Yeah, maybe a corner 3. Don't go to the top of the key. Don't go to the slots. Definitely don't go in the block of the paint.
Well, okay, so any of my friends or family that are listening, they would know a corner 3 is literally the only thing in the game of basketball that I can do.
You got a shot then.
So when you see the video afterwards and I haven't shot a basketball in a couple of months, I don't want that to be indicative of what I could do in high school, because I almost got kicked off the team because that was the only thing I would do. I just stand in the corner and coach said, Paul, are you ever going to move? No, it's my job, coach.
It's like the NBA. That's like the $9 billion corner. You can make that swing corner 3, man. You make $9 million a year.
Stuck with it. If I was a little more athletic,
You're in the wrong era.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, so to talk about the other 3 transfers that you mentioned, you can start with whoever you want. Maybe start with Dior, to just go about their game, and for Ohio fans that are just learning about this roster, what those other 3 guys bring to the table.
Yeah, if you look at Dior, Columbus kid, and he carved a really good path for himself. Went to a couple different JUCOs, and then went to Appalachian State. Was a big part of their success down there. And, he wanted a different tempo. They were very methodical down there. I think one of the slower possession teams in the country. And, when he went in the portal as well, it was the same thing. Geography was big for him, being close to home. Our style of play, getting up and down, an up-tempo system for him, really drew him to us. And, when we met with he and his family, same thing. He came and visited. It was a great, perfect match, on the court, off the court. And then if you look at Jalen Breath, he's a big, strong kid, a great post interior defender, can really move his feet on the perimeter. Another guy who wanted to expand his game, coming from UNC Greensboro. Started 2 years for him, averaged about 7 and 7. And he's really grown, this summer and give us really another good presence inside. Another winner, just a great young man to be around. And then Carter Reese is a walk-on for us. Came from Ohio Northern. He and his dad and I played together here. Mike Reese, Hamilton, Ohio kid.
Yep.
Played with Chris Kingsbury on some really good teams there, and so he's a good player. We might redshirt him this year. We'll see how it goes, but we feel really good about those 4 transfers.
And Jackson Pavletsky's back. Some of the returners, you can take it however you want, where this team is bringing back some production from last year.
Yeah, if you look at last year's roster, we had so many injuries last year, which really derailed us. We were playing A.J. Sheldon at the foursome, Elmore James at the foursome, just out of necessity. And if you look at starts with Jackson Pavletsky, he's a kid who could have easily left but stayed here. Loves his teammates, loves Ohio University. Had a great season last year. I think he'll have an even better season this year. Tough kid, can really shoot the basketball, score the basketball, puts a lot of pressure on the defense. And, we're happy he came back. And then if you look at A.J. Sheldon and Nada Hadaway, 2 guys who are 4-year players, for us, who've been here from day one. Guys who know how we want to do things, know what to say in the locker room. They're both experienced. Aiden Hadaway broke his foot last year and missed, the majority of the MAC season. We were 4-0, I think, heading into Akron when he broke his foot. That was a really, really big loss for us. His energy level, his defense, his rebounding, his athleticism, we missed, the rest of the MAC play. And then A.J. Sheldon's a tough kid, plays both ends. Struggled shooting last year, but shot 40% the year before. So we expect him to have a really good senior year. And then you look at Elijah Elliott, made the All-MAC freshman team last year, a dynamic athlete, can play on the ball, can play off the ball, and should step into that Miles Brown, Sharif Mitchell, defensive role for us, which we'll really miss, my Sharif from last year defensively.
So expecting a lot more this year. Obviously trying to stay healthy and all of those elements as well, but trying to stay healthy compounded with the fact that you're adding some serious talent here and looking forward to a pretty good year.
Yeah, definitely. If you look last year, like I said, 30 years of coaching, I've never been through something like that. The dynamic and the amount of injuries and really the to who they were. And, we kind of mixed and matched, from the first Akron game on and, end up having some really good wins, end up beating Kent State here, Akron here, and, just really competed and, proud of the guys who were in there, but, just different. So staying healthy is obviously a big key. And, we got a great group of returners, a core group of guys coming back and bringing in those transfers. We feel good about the experience we have overall.
Putting together some notes for this show, I was scrolling around on Twitter, just trying to find anything I could, just some picking some things out. And I saw Mid-Major Madness, a Twitter account that I follow and read a lot. Shout out Mid-Major Madness for this one. They put out a tweet, I don't know, a couple weeks ago at this point, and they said, does anybody in the country have a harder first opening 6 games or so than Ohio? And they said Arkansas State, Illinois State, at St. Mary's, at Louisville, Bethune-Cookman, and then a neutral against George Mason. You're talking about teams that even the mid-major teams that I mentioned are going to be picked right toward the top of their conference. Then you add in St. Mary's, you add in Louisville. How did you assemble this schedule, and why did you assemble this schedule this way?
I think I had to have hit my head really hard and had a concussion. When I was doing that schedule. But, I think for us, it's going to be 3 days in March, right? This league's a one-bid league, and we're building towards that. And, if you look at the 2 teams we're playing, it's going to be like a MAC championship, game on Monday, November 3rd. And, Arkansas State's new coach, but, I have a ton of respect for Ryan Pannone. I followed his career, and they have a lot of really talented players, and he's a phenomenal X and O's coach. So right off the jump, it's going to be like a MAC championship level, and then you quick turnaround to Illinois State, who beat us last year. They're going to have one of the best bigs in the country, doesn't matter what level. I think, the dynamic they have, they kept 2 of their best players. So give Coach Pete a lot of credit for that and his culture and what they've been able to do. But you're looking at 2 teams that'll probably be picked either first, second in their league. In the Sun Belt and the Missouri Valley right off the bat. Thankfully, they're at home, but those 2 games will be high level for us to kind of see where we're at. And then, the following week, you're going to play a St. Mary's team who's been in the top 25. The last couple of years, Akron's been out there, Kent State's been out there, and then we'll take a red eye back, head over to Louisville, which will probably be top 5, top 10 program. So the first 2 weeks are a gauntlet for us, and Bethune-Cookman.
Yeah.
You look at who they brought in. That's not going to be an easy game, and they got a couple kids from the MAC. Got a couple 5-stars coming in. So, those games will really test us and challenge us. It's got to be one of the hardest non-conference schedules that's been here at Ohio University. But like I said, we're going to keep growing and building this thing, staying positive, keep working, and build for those 3 days of March.
Yeah, and I think to your point, you talk about how you're as a team, as a unit, that that's the goal, and that in March, when you get to that MAC tournament, all you need to do, and I say all you need to do as if it's easy, but you need to win those 3 games to play in the big dance. And what can you do in November to separate yourself so that by the time the MAC play rolls around, you're experienced?
Yeah, I think the Sun Belt's always a crapshoot. They try to figure out who the top teams in each league are and pair you up. The first game of the year. Illinois State's a return home and home. Like I said, we went up there last year, and then the two games are for us. St. Mary's and Louisville are bye games for us, but they're great opportunities for our program from an exposure standpoint. Playing 2 historically NCAA tournament teams, and then like you said, Bethune-Cookman's going to be a tough game, and then going down to Daytona, we wanted to look for a really good mid-major tournament, and the other 2 teams in that are Florida Atlantic and Loyola Marymount.
Yeah.
So George Mason will be picked probably top 4 in their league. So we're going to be battle tested early. We're going to see where we're at, and I'm excited about the opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm just, it's funny hearing all of these coaches as I've gone through the summer talk about how difficult it is at points to schedule or to get high major programs on the schedule because they don't want to take risks in that like 100 to 175 range. It just doesn't pay off. Did you find yourself with some of that difficulty?
Every year. And if you look at the scheduling, it's like net 275 plus. There's only so many 275 plus teams that people can play.
Yeah.
So you're like, hey, you're trying to stay in there. And Kyle Barlow does our scheduling. If you see the amount of no's that he's been told, like he writes them all down. And it's discouraging a little bit because you can't get games. And Toledo's had that same issue. Akron and Kent. You look at, I'm sure Miami, Travis is going through it this year. Based on the season they had last year. But it's a credit to our program. I think it's better than the alternative where everyone's calling you to play them. As opposed to you trying to call everyone and being told no. So. We'll always try to schedule a difficult non-conference, try to get different scenarios where we're playing different styles of play because, when you get to the MAC, it's an unbalanced league. We're not playing a true round robin. So, certain games are going to matter and you're going to see certain styles of play. So you try to do that in a non-conference as much as you can.
Deer Park Roofing has been providing elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. So whether your needs are residential or commercial, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is, protect what's important. And what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com today. deerparkroofing.com.
What makes us human? Humanity is found in the actions that redefine care. Actions that we at TriHealth take every day. By seeing those who feel invisible, hearing needs that have been ignored. TriHealth is healing the body and the human spirit, so all can know and live a better life.
All right, we'll take a step back here and we'll talk about Jeff Boals as a coach and maybe some of your coaching influences that you had growing up, getting into this game. I mean, this is going to be I mentioned year 7 here at Ohio, but you're 31 in general as a coach. Who were some of your biggest influences on your coaching career to get you to this point? Yeah,
I've been very fortunate in my 31 years of coaching. What is this? I guess starting year 10 as a head coach. Wow. To be around some really, really good coaches, not only head coaches, but assistants that I've worked with. It started with Larry Hunter. When I was here, he was old school, very demanding, always held you accountable. And, he was a worker, so I think, playing for Larry and then working for him for a year, I saw two different sides of him, but that kind of set the mold of just, I can hear it to this day, him yelling compete. He was all about competition, all about competing. So that foundation, it was really good for me. And then, worked for a guy, Jason G. at University of Charleston, Greg White at Marshall, Mark Schmidt at Robert Morris for 2 years, Keith Dambrot at Akron for 3 years, and then Thad Mata for 7. And, countless number of assistant coaches that I still consider friends that, help you out as well. But you always take something different from every coach that you coach with. Keith Dambrot was really big on, touch points, communication, relationships with the players. Every single day, just communicating with them somehow, some way. Thad Mata was an unbelievable communicator, very positive driven, just treated guys the right way and had an unbelievable gut instinct. And, those two, I worked with Keith for 3 and Thad for 7. So you always draw something. And, when I first got the head coaching job at Stony Brook, I reached out to probably 15 coaches, just say, what would you recommend first year as a head coach? And everyone, said the same thing. Hey, be yourself. You can't be Thad, you can't be Keith, and you're going to draw things from them, but you got to be yourself. You got to be genuine. And I really feel like I was able to do that, year 1, year 2, year 3.
What did you learn about yourself when you need to be yourself? What does being Jeff Boals mean? Yeah,
being genuine, being positive, having a growth mindset, just continue to get better. Don't worry about, that you lost, but how you lost, and kind of correct that, fix it. I remember my first time out in a real game. I think I called a 30-second timeout, and before the first horn hit, I didn't say one word. Everything happened so quick. And, I called Thad, and I'm like, hey, he's like, well, you got to know what you're going to say before you call a timeout. So, you always learn something as a first-time head coach. And, that first year was really good for me. Just from a growth standpoint, we were in so many close games where I wasn't ready for, the last 2 minutes of those close games. So, I would go back and watch the last 5 minutes of all our close games and, came up with 2 out of bounds, 2 side out of bounds, 2 set plays that we knew we were going to run in crunch time. Like most things, 20/20 hindsight's always the clearest. You can always look back and get better. And, that's what you want to do, just keep growing and staying positive.
Yeah, and now to apply that here at Ohio, how do you feel like you've assembled your staff? What were some of the priorities in finding your assistants and putting this staff together?
Yeah, very, very fortunate, very lucky to have the staff that we have. If you look at the better teams across the country, the staff continuity is probably one of the most important things that you can have as a head coach. And Jake Ness I brought with me from Stony Brook, Lamar Thornton brought with me from Stony Brook. Kyle Barlow's been here since day 1 with us. Lee Martin came after year 1. He was a head coach at Hargrave Military Academy. So we've been very, very fortunate. I've been very fortunate to have those guys because, I feel confident if I wasn't at practice, they could run a practice without me. Last year, I think I had a COVID, missed 2 years ago, missed a game, and, felt very confident those guys stepping in and, it was the most miserable feeling watching a game on TV, not being there. And we ended up winning the game against Delaware. There was a shot in the air to win it at the buzzer. And I was following it online. I was watching on TV, and the online was a little bit faster than the TV feed. And I'm like, what's going on? But
are you a soccer fan at all?
Love soccer.
So did you see that happen at Inter Miami a couple weeks ago? Did you see what happened? The manager
coach was in the stands.
Got ejected from the match. So if you didn't see it, Inter Miami's manager got ejected from the match a couple weeks ago. He goes up into the stands and he gets on a phone and calls his assistant. And you can see the cameras panning back and forth between the manager, head coach, and the assistant. You just want to hop on a phone here and maybe throw an earpiece in and get on your bench here over the phone.
It was a miserable feeling. It's the second game I've ever missed in 31 years. Of coaching, and it's a bad feeling. But when you have a staff like we had, I felt comfortable and confident that they would do everything that I would do. So it's comforting to know those guys are here.
You have a family. How hard is it being a coach 31 years and having to miss probably a lot of birthdays, celebrations, things like that? because you're balancing being a coach and being a dad.
Yeah, it's hard. And, every coach is in the same boat. I remember when I was at Stony Brook, it was July 14th, my wife's birthday, and I'm down recruiting in Brooklyn, and I'm sitting there and thinking, like, in whatever years we were together, I maybe made one birthday. And I made the decision to leave that event, go take my wife, to dinner that night. And, you miss a lot of things, and there's a lot of sacrifice, from a spouse standpoint, from a kid standpoint. Like you said, my daughter swam at Florida State. I wasn't able to see, as many meets as I wanted to. Thankfully, with COVID, everything started being streamed. Same thing with my son and his, soccer or, basketball events, watching those online. Those kids sacrifice a lot. And when you lose a game, you normally get 3 or 4 text messages. Your mom, your wife, and your kids. When you win a game, everybody texts you. So those guys have sacrificed a lot, in their lives for what I'm doing. But there's way more positives that come out of it, than negatives. But being away from those things is tough for anybody.
I was going to say, what are some of the lessons you feel like you've learned? Maybe a coach is listening that's new to the coaching profession, or they're a recent head coach and they're trying to balance all this as well.
Yeah, I think one of the best things of working for Thad, is work-life balance. And with a cell phone and a laptop, you can do your work anywhere. You don't have to sit in the office all day. Obviously, be around for the players. But Thad was awesome. Like, if your kids had an activity, he was like, "Hey, if you're not doing anything, go watch them at 4:30 on a Tuesday." And for me, that was important, and it was important for my family. And I'll never forget my wife. The very first week I was at Ohio State, I had a recruit coming in for a visit. So it's my first recruit at Ohio State coming. And my wife's mom was in hospice care, and she was up in Akron, where I came from. And she was by herself. She's the only child. And when Thad found out about it, he was like, "Hey, look, if you don't go up and spend time with your wife right now, I'm gonna fire you. I don't care who you have coming in." So I literally picked up, drove up there, and my wife's mom died that night. And my wife will never forget, the Thad Mata, let me do that. So that was a big moment. And I think, life's hard. And when you coach, especially nowadays, it's year round. And if you look at our staff, when I first got here, we had, 0 kids. And now between our strength coach, between our staff, I think we have about 9 little ones, probably 4 years old and under, running around, which is an awesome thing. And I encourage them to bring their kids in. If daycare's closed or somebody's sick and can't go, bring them in. I'll watch them during practice and let them coach. But I think it's important for them to be around their kids and their kids to be around us and see the family atmosphere and environment. And I think it's a cool thing to have those guys around.
Yeah, and to be able to encourage them, like you said, build that atmosphere, build a trust. Probably they appreciate that too, right? That you feel like you're building something here that's bigger than just basketball, right?
Yeah, and parenting's hard. I went through a lot of mental health issues with my son and daughter when I was at Stony Brook and coming back. And there's a lot of coaches that go through that with the change and the move, because my daughter was 16, I think, lived in eight different cities, and that's hard on anybody. And normally when you take a job as a head coach or even assistant, you leave and your wife has to deal with getting the house ready to sell, keeping the house clean, still doing her job and helping the kids out, and there's a big burden on them. And my wife's a rock star. She's a career woman, works for Deloitte Consulting, and she's been a rock star through the whole thing. But dealing with the change and the move, sometimes that's hard for kids, and you really got to be cognizant of, their emotions, their feelings, because you're taking them away from what they know into a brand new environment. So, I encourage my staff, like same thing like Thad did. If you can, if you have something going on, you don't need to be in the office. Go spend time with your family. Watch them in the morning. Come in when you need to, and it's worked out well.
How much do you keep up with Thad?
All the time. I talk to him at least once a week. He's a huge mentor for me. I wouldn't be here, where I'm at today without him. So, he's been awesome for my career.
A minute ago, you mentioned how this sport has gone year round, right? And you have the way that season ends, you have postseason, then all of a sudden, boom, you got the transfer portal. Used to be the time that you could take off. Now you're right back into recruiting. that's a condensed time frame. You have a month or so to put your team together and get everything, all your ducks in a row. Then maybe you have a little time off, but all of a sudden, boom, they come back for the summer session and you're here. Then school starts. Where's the break? How do you balance all that?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be like, August and May were your 2 months. Like if you look at every coach in the country, they're probably married either in May or August. Like I was August 12th. And I told my brother and my sister, like, if you want me in your wedding, you're going to have a May or August wedding. My brother got married May Memorial Day. My sister got married, August 11th. And, it's hard. You have to, take the time. The NABC's done a good job of, doing some dead periods, but you're still coaching your team. You still have your workouts going on. And like you said, normally after the Final Four, you have a little break and time to exhale, but the portals season starts right away. And I encourage my staff, I encourage every one of my players, I don't care what we have going on through the course of the summer. If we have organized weights, practice, individual workouts, if you have a vacation, take it. I don't care what we're doing. I want them to recharge, re-energize, spend time with their families. It's important. Missing 1 week or, a couple of days out of a week, it's not going to be the end-all, be-all for us. So it's hard, but you have to make time and do it.
What are some of the things you've learned in the portal process of identifying talent that you feel like, so you talked earlier about the character and the types of players you want to recruit, but when you're watching some of these players on film that you haven't seen before, and you have this expedited process where you might have 7 days or less to identify a player that you want, and you want them to get to commit right there on the spot, what are some of the things that you've learned to be able to differentiate and see on tape that if you can't see him in person, you can still say, oh, I know that sticks out? How have you learned over these last few years how to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing because like you said, you recruit high school kids, sometimes you have months to years to build that relationship, and them, you get them to campus multiple times. In the portal, we'll have a portal party. We'll order a bunch of food, hunker down, get on Synergy, and just like lock in on the, multiple kids and, make our list. But you try to do your due diligence. Hopefully you have some type of relationship with them where you recruited them before and you might know them or know somebody, know the staff, AAU team or high school, coaches that know these kids. But you got to do a lot of work in a short amount of time. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a head coach the other day. He's like, we recruit a kid for a week. I don't even know the kid's mom and dad's name, what grandma's name is. And, you're just, bringing these kids in. It's a whirlwind. So you got to have to do your due diligence and as much as you can going into it, knowing you're going to have a short time frame to build some type of relationship and get them on campus, and everything happens so quick now. Yeah.
Do you feel like as a staff, I'm not saying obviously you're reaching out to kids or anything like that, but I'm just saying throughout the season, I don't know. It just, to me, it feels like if you're not at least keeping an eye on things throughout the season, and then all of a sudden you have to go into the off season and create a list. But it's hard to do because you don't know what player is going to be in the portal. How do you even begin that process?
Yeah, it's hard. You got to be as prepared as possible. It used to be where you had 3 seniors, you had 3 scholarships, and we're going to replace them. Now, you could have, 4 seniors and come out with 8 scholarships in the springtime. So you always have to be prepared somehow, some way, and track kids who might not be playing as much as they thought they're going to be, and just got to be ready. And as soon as that kid hits the portal, you have to be ready to call them and try to get in there. I can't imagine a kid that's going in the portal, the amount of attention and calls and texts that those kids are getting. That's got to be a whirlwind.
What does the spread look like at the portal party?
Depends, pizza, wings, your typical like football, weekend, just kind of hunkering down and throwing the Synergy on there and try to watch as many kids and get as many opinions from the staff, trying to, figure out who we can get. Number one, you don't want to waste time on kids you might not have any option of getting, and getting everyone's opinion. Because I think everyone, laying eyes on, it matters, and getting everyone's feedback.
Is it like a fantasy football draft board that you're throwing names up on the board and then you're crossing somebody off?
That's a good way to put it.
Is that what it is?
That's a great way to put it. And, you try to watch as many clips as you can and get a feel, and then, prioritize who you want to call first, second, third. And, And you're fighting for weekends because there's only a certain amount of weekends, before the Final Four and then after the Final Four. So everyone's trying to angle for those prime weekends.
Would you like to see the portal get pushed back till after the national championship is over, or do you like where it is now?
I think it's tough for those teams that are, Sweet 16, Elite 8, to be able to navigate that. That's got to be a lot for them. But like I said, you're talking about 16 teams out of 360. So I'd like to see the window condensed, like football just did.
Yeah.
45 days to 30. That's a long time. Where you're trying to figure out, and like I said, for 3 weeks, we thought we had somebody coming back, and then they come and tell us they're leaving. That's 3 weeks where we missed out on recruiting other portal kids. It's a fine line.
To go back to the scheduling, Ohio State on a charity exhibition, how'd that come together, and how excited are you for that one?
So it's a great opportunity for us, and for our fan base. We have a lot of fan in Columbus, Ohio. I worked at Ohio State with Jake Diebler. He was our video coordinator when I was there, and Jake and I are really good friends. So, we talked about it and came up with a date. I believe it's the 26th on a Sunday. It's going to be 4:00. So it'll be great for our guys being on that stage and playing in front of them, and bringing the Bobcat faithful into the Schottenstein Center to give us a good challenge.
What does Jeff Boals like to do off the court?
I would say 2 things, or actually 3 things. Spend time with my family as much as possible. My daughter swam at Florida State, and she graduated last year. She's in the MBA MSA dual program now here at Ohio University. And my son, Chase, is a sophomore here. So spend as much time with them as I can. Obviously, they got their own thing going on. Second thing I'd like to do, I like to cook. I like to follow a lot of Instagram people. I got to get past like 4, ingredients though. I'm not one of those that can add like, oil and cream and, mixed paprika and all that stuff. I need the pre-made stuff. But I love to cook. And the third thing is play golf. So those 3 things.
Well, this is fantastic. So we come back, we do it. Well, it's funny you say that because I was watching a video that it was like an introductory video, I guess, that you guys had put on your social media talking about or introducing Javen to the fan base. He mentioned cooking. Did you know that? Have you talked to him about that?
I know Javen likes to grill. He's a big griller. But my mom's a baker, chef, cook. I mean, she can make anything. She'll go to a restaurant, take a bite, and she'll be like, I can make that. And
what are the 4 ingredients you cook with?
Well, very simple.
Maybe I'm exposing you. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't ask.
Well,
we can cut it later. It's not live.
I'm doing like chicken, steak, salmon, but I'm not making your casseroles. I'm not to that point yet. But one of these days, I got a bunch of recipes saved, and I'll invite the squad here over. Man, we'll have a great meal. Whatever your drink of choice is, we'll have that as well. And I think you'll enjoy it.
Favorite golf course you've ever played?
I played a lot of great ones. When I was in Long Island, my favorite's Friars Head out in Long Island, New York. But there's some great ones in Columbus, Muirfield, Double Eagle Golf Club. I haven't played Scioto. It's the only one I haven't played. But when I was in Long Island, there's some awesome golf courses out there. Sabonic right on the water was a really cool one. Shinnecock.
Oh, yeah.
Played Bethpage Red. I didn't play Black. That's not good for my game. I need a little open space to be able to slice that thing.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Bethpage Black's a little tighter than my golf game allows. But
would you go to Bethpage and camp out for the tee? You see that? You know how they do that? They camp out for the tee times the night before. What time is your cutoff?
I was a Long Island resident, so I was able to sign up for it. Normally if you're not a resident, you got to go at whatever time in the morning. You stand in the line and get thrown in there. So the one time I played, I actually signed up for it a week before. So
you didn't have to show up at 3 a.m.
Being a Long Islander paid off.
Ever have a hole-in-one?
I've never had a hole-in-one. This past spring I played Double Eagle, and I was an inch away, hitting the ball really well. And then I went down to Joe Burrow's outing down in Batavia, his foundation outing. And on hole 4, it was a cool thing. They had a guy in a green jacket up there with a mic. He sounded just like Jim Nantz, commentating everybody's shot, making fun of him if it was a bad shot. And I striped this one. It was 179 yards, par 3, tucked in the right side. I striped my shot, and that sucker went up there. And he's like, ladies and gentlemen, put your clubs back in your bag. There's not going to be a better shot all day. And I was the morning flight. So we had the morning flight, afternoon flight to go through the whole thing. And that was probably our 4th hole of the day. So the best thing about that is everybody who walked up to that green went to read who hit the closest pin and saw my name for the rest of the day. Chris Collinsworth, Boomer Esiason, Chase Brown, you name it, they were reading that. And so that was the second one I was almost close to this spring, but I've never had one.
Jeff,
have you had one?
No, I've not. I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm improving. I've spent the summer improving.
If it's a corner 3, it's going in. Par 3, not so much.
No, not so much. We'll be wide of the green. The corner 3, we'll see. What we're gonna do probably is just slice in a bunch of bricks that I'll put up here in a few minutes. Hopefully not. Coach, I really appreciate you taking some time today to sit down. I'm glad we had the opportunity to make this work. Is there anything else maybe that I haven't asked you, or for Ohio fans listening that maybe they can expect this season from this team, and anything else maybe that I haven't asked?
No, I think the biggest thing is this: our fan base is going to love this team. They play hard. They're selfless. We've led the MAC in attendance. All 6 of my years here, and it's a great crowd. So we need everybody. November 3rd, Arkansas State. It's going to be a big game, and I'm excited about the process of the season.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully I can make it back up here at some point. We can make it back up for a game at some point this season. But appreciate you being a fan of the show.
No doubt.
And for sitting down here today. Thank
Appreciate
you, Jeff Boals. Thank
Thanks
you very
for
much. Absolutely. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already here to the Rebound Rundown. Plenty more content coming throughout the rest of the offseason. That is Jeff Boals. And stay tuned. We'll have a little vlog-style video. First time we're doing that. That'll come out here in a little bit with Javen Simmons. So that'll recap the day, show some behind the scenes of all of this, and we'll have more of that coming as well. So make sure you subscribe. Getting ever closer to opening night, November 3rd for the college basketball season. I'm Paul Fritschner signing off. Thanks for listening today to the Rebound Rundown. Good stuff.